After a week of on again, off again Trump's tariffs, which has now, the dust has settled in on the additional levies that will be applicable to all countries. On India Global, we decode how will this impact the Indian economy. With exemptions for smartphones and electronics in play, the key question I ask is, will this now provide the much needed impetus and boost to India's manufacturing aspirations? For long, India has been wanting that 25% of its GDP should come from manufacturing, which has been stuck at about 15-16 odd percent. Will Donald Trump's tariffs provide us that impetus? I'm going to ask those big questions as always on India Global. First up, will India be the big gainer of the tariffs that have been imposed on China? Remember, there's been a relaxation on everybody. The 90-day pause is applicable for all countries barring China. Next up, the next key question: what reforms are really needed for India to make the most of this opportunity where there are huge tariffs on China and not so much on India? Next up, the next key question, which is that which sectors will actually stand to gain the most when it comes to India? Will it be electronics, will it be textiles, or will it be any other where the push could be very significant? Next up, what are the thorny issues that remain as far as US-India trade are concerned? The expectation is that these tariffs would lead the way towards a bilateral trade treaty. But to sign a bilateral trade treaty, you need to tide over the thorny issues. What are those? I'm going to put that for question to Andrew Latham, who's joining me live to talk more on this. Andrew, you know, we've almost now digested those tariffs because there's now also a 90-day pause on all countries barring China, which is why I'm asking that how much do you think this would have a positive impact on India because of now the substantial cost differential between Chinese goods and Indian goods?
Well, there are a couple of ways of thinking about Trump's tariffs and a couple of different ways that he's framed them. One of them is as a negotiating lever so that he can bring countries to the table and negotiate freer trade, which would, of course, be good for countries like India that have a lot to export in terms of services and goods and manufactured goods. Securing access to the American market would be very, very good for India. But Trump also wants some reciprocity there as well. He wants to make sure that American goods and services have access to India, and it wants to overcome not just the tariff barriers, but the non-tariff barriers as well. As you know, India's economy, even though we're past the 1990s and there's been a liberalization of the Indian economy, the Indian state still plays a huge role, especially in terms of protecting agriculture, Indian farmers, for example. And so there's a lot to be negotiated there. But if I'm being charitable to the Trump administration, it is threatening to use tariffs to bring other countries to the table in order to reduce everybody's tariffs. It's only one way of thinking about it.
Right. Everybody's tariffs will get probably renegotiated. Some of them are already happening. Last count is 130 countries are now talking to the Trump administration. Be that as it may, on India Global, I'm first talking about India, which is that how do we stand to benefit? Because, you know, for long we've talked about headwinds, but at this stage, what I'm reading are possible tailwinds that will help us maybe in textiles, maybe in electronics. Let's pull up that graphic for electronics and smartphones as to just how much the tailwinds have right now and exist right now, specifically for the smartphone and electronics segment. Andrew?
Well, again, I think there's simply India has comparative advantage with respect to certain kinds of manufactured goods. Some of them are at the low end of the value-added scale, T-shirts and textiles and things like that. Some of them are at the higher end. And to the extent that the Trump administration can, first of all, eliminate its own tariffs on India, but then encourage India to reform its internal marketplace in certain ways, it could be a win-win situation. There could be a lot more bilateral trade between India and the US, which could benefit both Indian and American consumers. The devil, though, always is in the details. what kind of deal will be done? And in terms of India, what kind of internal political impediments are there to liberalizing the internal marketplace in India? Because, as you know, there are a lot of political constituencies in every country, but we're talking about India today, that would rather keep foreign goods out and foreign services out. And so, we're back to a situation in which if this leverage that the Trump administration is bringing to bear can, first of all, reduce Indian tariffs, but also help India liberalize its internal marketplace. Again, I think that would be very good for Indian consumers, but it remains to be seen.
All right, very quickly, we're playing some of those graphics for smartphones and electronics in general. But the other thing I want to ask you is about the low end in the value chain, which is textiles. Where do you see that having an impact?
Well, it depends on what the deal is. India competes with some Southeast Asian countries with respect to textiles and things like that, also with China. So it depends on the details of whatever deal can be struck. But potentially, nobody in the U.S. makes these kinds of goods. I mean, that's just not where the American economy is, and it's not where it's ever going to be. The only real question, live question, is where is the United States going to access these goods? Where's it going to import them from? Is it going to be Cambodia or Vietnam or China or Taiwan or India? And I think there's a very good case to be made that it will be India.
Let's leave it there, Andrew, on what this means for India. Bottom line, viewers, is that there are many pluses and several minuses of the changed economic scenario that India is now living in. On the plus side, I said this earlier, I'm saying this again, India's electronics exports to the US are going to be a big beneficiary. They've been on the rise. China's have been on the decline in the last 5 years to the US. And given that the PLI scheme has been most successful in the electronic space, this is where one is going to see the maximum impact of India's manufacturing capability really getting a boost. Textiles could be the other. Why? Because US is the largest importer of textiles, and the tariff differential now, as things stand, between India, not just China, but also Vietnam and Thailand, is significant, which means that on one end we can take care of the higher value chain, which is your smartphones, electronics, and on the other end you can take care of the lower end of the value chain, which is textiles. The big test, of course, will come in the agri sector, where at some point of time a give and take will have to be seen, because that, in my opinion, could be a thorny issue that Indian policymakers will have to find an answer to for the Trump administration to be able to solve and sign that trade agreement.